I didn't realize my marriage had ended until my husband introduced me as someone else. We were standing in a sunlit courtyard just off the Arno, marble underfoot still warm from the afternoon heat. A long table had been set with wine glasses and small plates, the kind of casual elegance Julian loved to perform in front of other people. This was supposed to be our retirement trip. 27 years of work, sacrifice, and compromise wrapped up in Italy. His idea. His promise. He had his hand on my lower back when the group approached. 2 men from an international firm he'd been consulting for, their wives, and a woman I didn't recognize. Tall, polished, too comfortable beside him. Julian smiled that smooth, professional smile I'd watched him use in boardrooms for decades. "Everyone," he said, lifting his glass. "This is Sophia, and this," his hand slipped off me, "is Margot. A friend." A friend. The word landed wrong. Softly spoken, casually delivered, but it cracked something deep in my chest. For half a second, I waited for him to fix it, to laugh, to say my wife, to correct himself the way people do when they misspeak. He didn't. No one laughed. No one moved. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable, broken only by the sound of cutlery from another table. One of the men glanced at me, then back at Julian. His wife's smile faltered. Sophia didn't look surprised. She looked relieved. I felt heat rush to my face, but I didn't let it show. Years of swallowing discomfort had trained me well. I straightened my spine, lifted my chin, and met Julian's eyes. He wouldn't look at me. "Friend?" I said calmly. Even my voice surprised me. Steady, clear. Julian finally glanced my way, irritation flickering across his face like I'd interrupted him. "Margot?" I didn't let him finish. "That's interesting," I said. "Because on the flight over, you called me your wife." A few heads turned. The wives shifted in their seats. Someone cleared their throat. Julian's smile tightened. "This isn't the time." I looked at Sophia then. Up close, she was younger than I'd first thought. Early 40s, maybe. Expensive watch. Confident posture. She held Julian's arm like it belonged to her, fingers resting easily where mine had been moments ago. "Did you know," I asked her gently, "that we've been married for 27 years? Her eyes flicked to Julian. Just once. That was all the confirmation I needed. Julian exhaled sharply. "Margot, please, you're embarrassing me." Embarrassing him, not humiliating me, not erasing decades of shared life in front of strangers. Embarrassing him. Something settled inside me then. Not anger, not hysteria. Clarity. I turned back to the group. "I apologize for the confusion," I said. "It seems I've been miscast." One of the wives murmured something under her breath. The men stared at their glasses. Julian's jaw worked like he was grinding down words he didn't want to say. "Let's step aside," he whispered urgently. "You're making a scene." I smiled. A small one. Controlled. "No, Julian, you did." I reached for my bag, slinging it over my shoulder. My hands didn't shake. I made sure of that. Then I looked at him. Really looked. At the man who had taken my career pauses as entitlement. My loyalty as background noise. My presence as optional. "I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening," I said. "All of you." I didn't wait for a response. I walked out of the courtyard, heels clicking against stone, my pulse loud in my ears. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I didn't look back. The street outside was busy with tourists and locals weaving past each other, laughter and language blurring together. Life moving on, indifferent to the collapse happening inside my chest. I walked until the noise faded, until I found a quiet stretch near the river. Then I stopped. My hands shook then, hard. I pressed them together, breathed through it. I thought of our house back in Charleston, the accounts I managed, the retirement funds I'd structured carefully over the years while Julian focused on himself, the inheritance my mother had left me, untouched by him because I'd insisted on keeping it separate. I thought of my daughter. How she'd once asked me why her father never introduced me the same way he used to. I pulled out my phone. Julian's name flashed on the screen before I could unlock it. I ignored it. Let it ring. Let it go silent. I scrolled to a different contact. Someone I hadn't spoken to in years, but who had told me once, very clearly, to call if I ever needed to protect myself. My thumb hovered for just a second. Then I tapped. "Hello?" came the voice on the other end. "It's Margot Hale," I said. "I'm in Italy, and I need to move quickly." There was a pause. Then, "Are you safe?" "Yes," I said, and I meant it. "But I won't be if I hesitate." "All right," she said, voice sharpening. "Start from the beginning." I looked back toward the direction of the courtyard, imagined Julian still standing there trying to smooth things over, confident I'd fold like I always had. I didn't smile this time. "I've just been publicly replaced," I said, "and I'm done being quiet." The call ended with instructions, with steps, with options. As I slipped my phone back into my bag, something else settled in my chest. Resolve. Cold. Focused. Julian thought introducing me as a friend would erase me. He was wrong. That night in Italy wasn't the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of his consequences. When I think back now, the warning signs weren't subtle. I just treated them like inconveniences, things you work around when you're committed to a life you've already built. Julian and I met in our 20s, both ambitious, both certain we were building something lasting. He was charming in that controlled way men are when they expect to be taken seriously. I believed in him early. I believed in us. When opportunities pulled him forward, I adjusted. When his career demanded more time, more travel, more attention, I became the one who absorbed the shockwaves. That was the bargain, unspoken but clear. I stepped back so he could step up. I turned down a promotion when our daughter was born because his schedule was non-negotiable. I managed the household, the calendars, the finances. I made sure taxes were filed, investments diversified, retirement accounts properly shielded. Julian liked to say money stressed him out. I handled it quietly, competently, because someone had to. For years, I told myself this was partnership. That sacrifice evened out over time. But somewhere along the way, Julian stopped seeing me as the reason his life functioned and started seeing me as part of the furniture. Reliable, invisible, replaceable. The changes came gradually. He stopped asking my opinion before making big decisions. He traveled more but shared less. Conversations became logistical, necessary, efficient. When I tried to talk about us, about what retirement would look like, how we'd finally slow down, he'd nod without listening, eyes already somewhere else. He also stopped introducing me properly. At first, I brushed it off. Margot, instead of my wife. Then, "This is Margot. We've been together forever." Like I was a colleague he'd survived a project with. I noticed the way his tone shifted around younger women, brighter, lighter. I noticed the way he straightened his jacket when they entered a room. I noticed. I just didn't confront it. Because confronting it would mean admitting that the life I'd organized so carefully might be hollow. The finances were the one place I never relinquished control. Not because I was suspicious, at least not consciously, but because my mother had taught me differently. When she passed, she left me a modest inheritance and one piece of advice. Never let someone else hold the keys to your future. I listened. The inheritance stayed separate. Retirement accounts were structured with protections Julian never questioned. He trusted me. Or more accurately, he never thought I'd use that trust against him. Our daughter, Claire, no, not Claire, Isla, grew up watching us the way children do, quietly absorbing patterns adults think are invisible. She adored her father, but she saw things I pretended not to. "Mom," she'd said once, years ago, "why does Dad talk over you when other people are around?" I laughed it off then, made excuses, told her it didn't matter. But it mattered. By the time Isla left for college, Julian was already halfway gone. He stayed out later when he was home, guarded his phone, took calls in other rooms. When I asked about it, he accused me of being suspicious, dramatic, bored. He said retirement had me imagining problems that didn't exist. I wanted to believe him. Italy was supposed to reset us. His idea again. A celebration, he said. A new chapter. I packed with cautious hope, ignoring the way he booked separate excursions, scheduled dinners with contacts, kept his phone face down on every surface. And then came the courtyard. The introduction. The erasure. After that night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the hotel room Julian never came back to, replaying moments I'd dismissed. Late-night client dinners. The sudden interest in his appearance. The way he'd stopped touching me months ago, claiming stress, age, distraction. By morning, I wasn't confused anymore. I called Isla. She answered on the second ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Mom, I need to ask you something," I said. "And I need you to be honest." That woke her up. I could hear it in her breathing. "Okay. Have you met someone with your father?" I asked carefully, who seemed more than professional? There was a pause. Too long. "Mom," she said quietly, "I didn't know how to tell you." My stomach tightened. "Tell me now." She exhaled. "At Thanksgiving. He brought a woman to the house when you were out with Aunt Ruth. He said she was a colleague. But they didn't act like colleagues." "How?" "She moved like she belonged there," Isla said. "Like it wasn't her first time. And when she left, Dad told me not to mention it because you were sensitive lately." Sensitive. The word felt familiar. Weaponized. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked. "I thought you knew," she said. "And when I realized you didn't, I didn't want to hurt you." I closed my eyes. "You didn't," I said. "He did." We stayed on the phone for a long time after that. She apologized. I told her not to. She told me she supported me. I told her I wasn't sure what came next. But I knew one thing with certainty. What happened in Italy wasn't a misunderstanding. It was confirmation. And everything Julian had taken for granted, my silence, my loyalty, my restraint, was about to become very expensive. By the time the sun rose over Florence, the shock had burned off. What replaced it wasn't rage. It was precision. I showered, dressed, and packed my suitcase without hesitation. I didn't touch Julian's things. I didn't leave a note. I treated the room the way I treated him now, like something I was done managing. At the front desk, I asked for a separate bill and a transfer to a smaller hotel across the river. The clerk didn't ask questions. People rarely do when you speak calmly and decisively. Once I was alone again, I sat on the edge of the bed, opened my laptop, and began. The woman I'd called the night before hadn't wasted time. By morning, I had emails waiting, documents, instructions, a checklist that turned chaos into steps. I followed it line by line. First, access. Every shared account Julian and I had. Frozen. Not emptied. Frozen. That distinction mattered. It wasn't theft. It was containment. Retirement funds protected. Joint credit lines paused. Travel cards restricted. I moved quietly, efficiently, the way I always had when I was protecting our future. Only now, I was protecting mine. Second, legal footing. I scheduled a virtual consult with a divorce attorney back home, one who specialized in high-asset separations and didn't confuse politeness with weakness. She listened while I explained the public introduction, the years of financial management, the separate inheritance. "Do not warn him," she said when I finished. "Let him discover the changes organically." That word, organically, made me smile for the first time in days. Third, documentation. I pulled bank statements, account histories, property records. I saved copies to a secure drive Julian had never known existed. I took screenshots of calendar overlaps, travel receipts, anything that showed pattern instead of coincidence. Years ago, I'd been teased for keeping things so organized. Now, organization was leverage. I texted Julian once, just once. "I've moved hotels. I'll be back in Charleston early. We'll talk then, nothing else." His response came seconds later. "What are you doing? This is ridiculous." I didn't reply. Instead, I booked my flight home, changed my seat, upgraded with points I'd earned managing accounts he barely glanced at. I notified the airline not to accept changes from anyone else on the reservation. Fourth, home base. I emailed our real estate agent, the one who trusted me because I'd always been the one handling paperwork. I asked for a valuation update for planning purposes. I scheduled a meeting for the week after my return. I contacted the accountant, requested a temporary hold on discretionary spending tied to Julian's consulting income until clarification of marital status. No drama, no accusations, just action. By midday, my phone started vibrating relentlessly. Julian called, then called again, then left a message. "Margot, stop this," his voice said, clipped and annoyed. "You're overreacting. We need to discuss this privately." Privately. That was always his preference. Silence, containment. A version of events he could manage. I listened once. I didn't save it. When the hotel door knocked, I thought it might be him. Instead, it was a courier delivering paperwork from the Italian branch of our bank. Confirmations, stamped and signed. I thanked him and closed the door. For the first time in years, my pulse felt steady. I flew home the next morning without Julian. I watched Italy disappear beneath the clouds and felt nothing but relief. Whatever fantasy he'd built there could stay with him. Charleston greeted me with humidity and familiarity. I drove straight home, unlocked the front door, and walked through the house like someone assessing an asset instead of a memory. I packed Julian's essentials into labeled boxes: clothes, documents, personal items. I didn't throw anything away. I didn't damage anything. I simply separated. By the time he landed back in the States, the locks had been reprogrammed, not changed, just updated. Temporary codes, time-limited access, legal, clean. I was pouring a glass of water when my phone rang again. This time, his tone was different. "What did you do?" Julian asked. Not angry. Not yet. Uncertain. "I reorganized my life," I said. "My cards aren't working," he snapped. The bank says the accounts are under review," I finished. "Which they are." "You can't just do this," he said. "You don't get to decide everything." I looked around the quiet kitchen, the schedules I'd kept, the finances I'd managed, the life I'd maintained while he drifted elsewhere. "I already did," I said. There was a pause, a long one. "Margot," he said, slower now. "You're making a mistake." I almost laughed. "No," I replied. "I'm correcting one." I ended the call before he could respond. For the first time since Italy, Julian sounded exactly like a man who'd just realized he no longer knew where the ground was. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They spread. Julian felt them first through inconvenience. Small things that irritated him before they frightened him. A declined card at the rental counter. A hotel asking for an alternate payment method. His assistant texting to ask why the corporate account had been flagged for review. He called me again. I didn't answer. By the third day, inconvenience had turned into panic. I heard about it through other people before I heard it from him. That alone told me everything I needed to know. Our accountant called first. Careful voice, neutral language. "Julian reached out this morning," he said. He seemed confused. "About?" I asked. "About why spending approvals now require your sign-off." "They always did," I said. He just never noticed. There was a pause on the line. Then a quiet, respectful, "Understood." The real shift happened when the social circle began to adjust. Julian had always relied on proximity. Dinners, golf, casual drinks where narratives could be shaped before questions were asked. But distance strips that advantage away. When people don't have the full story, they wait. When they sense instability, they hedge. Invitations slowed. Calls went unanswered. One of the wives from the Italy dinner reached out to me directly. A short message. Polite. Measured. "I hope you're all right." That night was uncomfortable. I wanted you to know I noticed. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The acknowledgement itself was enough. The woman from Italy, Sophia, felt it next. Her professional circle overlapped with Julian's more than either of them had anticipated. Consulting is small that way. People talk, especially when timelines don't add up. A colleague forwarded me a message she'd received, not realizing the irony. There's chatter about Julian Hale. Something about misrepresenting personal circumstances on recent contracts. You might want to distance yourself. Distance was exactly what Sophia began to do. She stopped answering Julian's calls, then blocked him, then quietly removed photos from social media. She didn't defend him. She didn't clarify. She vanished. That absence did more damage than confrontation ever could. Julian showed up at the house unannounced on the fourth day. I watched him through the camera feed before opening the door. He looked smaller somehow, rumpled, uncertain. The confidence he'd worn so easily in Italy had cracked. "Why didn't you tell me you were doing all this?" he demanded the moment I opened the door. "I did," I said. "I told you in Italy. You just didn't listen." "This is spiraling," he said. "People are asking questions." I stepped aside and let him in, but I didn't offer him a seat. "Good," I said. "They should." He ran a hand through his hair. "Sophia won't return my calls." I didn't react. "My assistant says there are rumors," he continued, "that I misled partners, that my personal situation could affect upcoming deals." "That's unfortunate," I said. "You're enjoying this," he accused. "No," I replied. "I'm observing it." He stared at me, searching for something. Emotion, hesitation, regret. He didn't find it. "This was never supposed to blow up," he said. "It was contained." Contained. The word again. "Affairs often are," I said. "Until they aren't." He swallowed. "Can we fix this? Quietly?" I shook my head. "That option expired when you introduced me as a friend." He left shortly after, slamming nothing, breaking nothing. That restraint told me he still believed there was a way back. That belief was fragile. Dangerous for him. That night, Isla called. "He showed up at my apartment," she said. "Said he was worried about you." "And?" I asked. "And I told him he should have been worried sooner." She paused. "Mom." He looked scared. I closed my eyes. "Good," I said softly. The first consequences had landed. Not loudly, not dramatically, but they were real. And Julian was finally beginning to understand that what he'd lost wasn't just me, it was control. The second confrontation didn't happen by accident. I chose the timing. I chose the place. And I chose the audience. It was a charity gala Julian had insisted on attending every year. A polished, respectable event held at a restored waterfront venue downtown. Donors, board members, press. The kind of room where reputations were currency and whispers traveled faster than sound. Julian assumed I wouldn't show. That assumption was his mistake. I arrived alone, calm, composed, dressed the way I always had for events like this, not to provoke, not to perform, but to be unmistakably present. Conversations paused when people recognized me. Smiles flickered, uncertain. People weren't sure which version of the story they were allowed to acknowledge yet. That uncertainty worked in my favor. Julian spotted me from across the room and froze. I saw it happen in real time. The moment he realized he no longer controlled the variables. He excused himself from a group and moved toward me, urgency sharpening his steps. "This is not appropriate," he hissed as he reached me. "You shouldn't be here." "I was invited," I said evenly. "As your wife." His jaw tightened. "We agreed to handle this privately." "No," I said. "You suggested that." I declined. A small circle had formed around us without anyone meaning to. People pretending to admire artwork, to check phones, to listen without appearing to listen. Julian lowered his voice. "You're going to humiliate me." I looked at him, really looked. "You already did that," I said. "I'm just making sure the record is accurate." Before he could respond, the event coordinator stepped onto the small stage near the center of the room. A microphone squealed softly, then steadied. "We'd like to thank one of our longtime supporters," she said, "Julian Hale, for his continued commitment." Julian's face lit with reflexive relief. Familiar ground, applause, validation. I stepped forward. "Actually," I said, loud enough to carry but calm enough to sound reasonable, "I need to clarify something before this continues." The room went silent. The coordinator looked startled. Julian turned sharply. "Margot, don't." I took the microphone from the stand gently. No tugging, no drama. "My name is Margot Hale," I said, "and I'm Julian's wife. We've been married for 27 years. A ripple moved through the room, not gasps, murmurs, recognition. "I'm aware there's been some confusion lately about my role," I continued, "including an instance abroad where I was introduced as something else." Julian reached for the microphone. I stepped back half a pace. "I won't take long," I said, "but I won't be misrepresented again." Someone in the crowd whispered my name. Someone else lifted a phone. "I supported Julian's career for decades," I went on, "managed our finances, built the stability that allowed him to stand here tonight, and I wanted on record that I did not step away from this marriage." I paused, letting the silence do its work. "He did," the room exhaled. Julian looked like he might speak, but nothing came out. His mouth opened, then closed. I handed the microphone back to the coordinator. "Thank you," I said. "That's all." I turned away before anyone could applaud, or argue, or intervene. I didn't see Sophia at first. Then I did. She stood near the back, pale, rigid, eyes fixed on Julian like he'd betrayed her too. When he finally noticed her, relief crossed his face. He started toward her. She stepped back. Not dramatically, not loudly, just enough to be unmistakable. Later, I heard she left through the side exit before the speeches resumed. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't answer calls afterward. The timing of her disappearance was noted by more than a few people. Julian didn't follow her. He couldn't. Too many eyes, too many questions, too much damage unfolding all at once. I left shortly after. I didn't rush. I didn't linger. I walked past people who looked at me with something new in their expressions. Respect, sympathy, recalibration. Outside, the night air was cool. The city lights reflected off the water in long, steady lines. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. A text from Julian. "You've destroyed everything." I stared at the screen for a moment. Then I typed back. "No, I corrected the story." I drove away before he could reply. By morning, the clip was circulating. Not sensationalized, not edited cruelly. Just clear. A woman standing up. A man exposed without insults or theatrics. Julian had lost something in that room he'd never get back. Credibility. And this time, there was no way for him to introduce himself out of it. Julian didn't collapse immediately. He tried to recover. That was his instinct. To control, to reframe, to smooth rough edges until people doubted what they'd seen with their own eyes. The morning after the gala, his version of events began circulating quietly. Not statements, conversations, carefully placed calls. He framed it as a misunderstanding. A private marital issue that had been mishandled publicly. He told people I was overwhelmed, struggling with the transition into retirement, prone to dramatic gestures. He never denied the introduction in Italy. He just minimized it. But damage control only works when there's no evidence waiting to surface. By noon, there was. A board member from the gala shared the clip with a journalist friend. Not maliciously, just conversationally. The journalist recognized the value immediately. Not scandal, exactly. Something cleaner, sharper. A story about credibility. The article didn't accuse, it asked questions. Consultant's personal turmoil raises concerns about disclosure practices. It outlined timelines. Italy, the gala. The contradiction between friend and wife. It quoted my words exactly: calm, measured, unassailable. Julian panicked. He called me 6 times that afternoon, left 3 voicemails. "This is getting out of hand," one said. "You need to help me shut this down." Another, "They're calling my office. This isn't fair." The last one was quieter. "I never meant for this to hurt you." That was the first time he'd said that. It was also far too late. The receipts arrived next, not from me, but from people Julian had underestimated. A former colleague leaked an email thread showing Julian misrepresenting his marital status on a conflict of interest disclosure months earlier. A small omission, technically defensible, optically devastating. Someone else posted a screenshot of a conference registration listing Sophia as his partner. The date predated Italy by nearly a year. None of it was sensational. That was the problem. It was factual. By evening, the conversation had shifted. No longer about a marriage, about trust, about whether Julian's word meant what it used to. The hashtag started quietly, just his name. Then phrases like full disclosure and professional ethics attached themselves. Julian tried to respond publicly once. His statement was polished, legal, hollow. "I regret any confusion caused by recent personal events. My professional conduct has always met the highest standards." The silence afterward was louder than outrage. Sponsors paused engagements. A consulting contract was delayed pending review. A speaking invitation quietly disappeared from his calendar. He called me again that night. This time, I answered. "Why aren't you stopping this?" he demanded. "I didn't start it," I said. "You could clarify," he said. "You could say it's private." "I did," I replied. "At first, you chose public." He was breathing hard. "They're destroying me." I thought of Italy, of the way he'd said friend without hesitation. "No," I said. "They're believing you." He went quiet. "What do you want?" he asked finally. That question used to make me feel powerful. Now it just felt sad. "I want distance," I said, "and honesty. Neither of which you're offering." He hung up without saying goodbye. By the end of the week, Sophia's name surfaced in the conversation, not attached to me, but to him. Her firm released a short statement affirming its commitment to transparency and ethical standards. She didn't mention Julian. She didn't have to. I heard through Isla that Julian had tried to see her again, showed up at her office, waited in his car, left messages that went unanswered. She told him to stop contacting her, Isla said. Said he was a liability. I closed my eyes, absorbing that word. Liability. It was a term Julian used to throw around casually, about people, about risks. Now, it belonged to him. The final blow came quietly. An internal review concluded he'd failed to disclose a personal relationship that intersected with his consulting work. Not illegal, but unacceptable. His firm severed ties. No press release, no announcement, just an email that ended with effective immediately. Julian didn't call me after that. He didn't need to. The escalation had reached its peak. The narrative had turned. The man who once controlled rooms now avoided them, and I hadn't raised my voice once. I stood in the kitchen that evening, phone face down on the counter, and realized something important. This wasn't revenge fueled by anger. It was accountability catching up to a man who'd mistaken my silence for weakness. And there was still more to come. The legal dismantling was quieter than the public collapse, but far more permanent. By the time Julian realized how exposed he was, the framework was already in place. Filing submitted, motions prepared, protections activated months, sometimes years, before he'd ever imagined needing them. The divorce petition landed with surgical precision. No accusations, no emotional language, just dates, structures, documentation, a clear outline of marital assets versus protected property. My inheritance, untouched. Retirement accounts traced to my management. Joint assets frozen pending equitable division. Julian's attorney called mine within hours. They asked for flexibility. They got silence. The house was the first domino. Not because I wanted it, but because Julian needed liquidity. Without consulting income, without sponsorships, without access to joint funds, he couldn't maintain appearances. Mortgage payments stalled. Taxes loomed. I didn't gloat. I let the process do its work. The court granted me temporary exclusive use of the home. Julian moved into a short-term rental paid for by a credit line that would soon disappear. His name was removed from discretionary accounts. Spending limits imposed. Oversight required. He wasn't used to oversight. Custody was simpler. Isla was an adult, but her affidavit mattered. She wrote clearly, calmly, about trust, about deception, about how watching her father rewrite reality had changed her view of him permanently. Julian read it in court and didn't look up once. Family fallout followed fast. His father called me directly, not to argue, not to defend his son. To apologize, he said, for raising someone who thought this was acceptable. He withdrew financial support Julian had relied on quietly for years. Consulting bridges, introductions, soft landings. They vanished overnight. Julian's brother followed suit. I can't be associated with this, he told him, according to Isla. Not professionally, not personally. Even his mother stopped taking his calls. Isolation is louder than anger. Julian learned that quickly. Sophia didn't resurface, not publicly, not privately. Her firm promoted someone else into her role. She moved cities, rebranded, severed the past cleanly. She survived. Julian didn't. By the third month, the court finalized asset division. I retained the house. He received a reduced settlement structured over time, conditional, monitored, revocable under breach. No lump sum, no freedom. He sold his car, then his watch, then furniture from the rental he couldn't afford anymore. He tried consulting independently, but trust doesn't regenerate on demand. People remembered. Carefully, quietly. I heard he spent a few weeks sleeping on a friend's couch. Then there was no friend. The final hearing lasted less than an hour. The judge didn't lecture, didn't moralize, just confirmed compliance and issued the decree. When it was over, Julian stood as if waiting for something else to happen, some dramatic reversal, some acknowledgement of loss. None came. Outside the courthouse, he tried one last time. "You didn't have to ruin me," he said. I met his eyes. "I didn't ruin you," I replied. "I stopped protecting you." That distinction landed harder than any insult could have. I walked away without looking back. Later that night, Isla came over. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd once balanced budgets and birthdays and everything in between. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. "I am. And for the first time since Italy, that wasn't a promise. It was a fact. Julian was no longer my problem. He was just a consequence. Living proof of what happens when you mistake loyalty for immunity. The last time Julian and I met, there were no lawyers, no microphones, no audience waiting to decide who they believed. Just two people in a nearly empty office with beige walls and a humming air vent that never quite shut off. He had asked for the meeting. Not formally, not through counsel. A message sent late at night that read more like a confession than a request. "Please, I need to see you once more." I agreed for one reason only. I wanted the ending to be unmistakable. He was already there when I arrived, sitting too straight in a chair meant for waiting, hands folded like he was afraid they'd betray him if left loose. He looked older. Not dramatically, not tragically, just stripped of polish. No tailored suit, no confident posture. The man who once controlled rooms now looked like someone hoping not to be asked to leave one. "Thank you for coming," he said, standing too quickly. I didn't sit. I placed my bag on the table and remained where I was. "You have 10 minutes, I said. He nodded, swallowing. "I won't take long." There was a pause, heavy with everything he didn't know how to say. "I never wanted it to end like this," he began. I said nothing. "I made mistakes. he continued. I didn't think— No, I interrupted calmly. You thought. You just chose yourself. He flinched. That was new. I lost everything, he said quietly. My work, my family, even her. I didn't respond. I know you think I deserve it, he added. Maybe I do. But I'm asking for mercy, Margot. Not forgiveness. Just mercy. I studied him. The man who had once told me I was embarrassing him in front of strangers. The man who had rewritten our marriage as an inconvenience. The man who had assumed I'd stay silent because I always had. What does mercy look like to you? I asked. His eyes flickered with hope. A pause. Some relief. You could release part of the settlement early. Write a letter clarifying that my professional conduct wasn't affected by personal matters. I almost smiled. So, I said, you want me to fix your reputation? He hesitated. You always knew how to manage things. There it was, the final misunderstanding. I managed us, I said. You dismantled that. He stood, pacing now. I didn't mean to replace you. But you did, I replied. Publicly, casually, without hesitation. He stopped. I was confused. No, I said again. You were comfortable. His shoulders sagged. I don't know who I am without you. That almost hurt. Almost. But grief without accountability is just another form of entitlement. You don't get to make that my responsibility, I said. He rubbed his face with both hands. I'm asking you not to finish me. I tilted my head slightly. Julian, I stopped that process the moment I walked away in Italy. Everything since then has been consequence, not punishment. He looked up at me then, eyes red-rimmed, searching. I loved you, he said. I let the silence stretch before answering. I believe you loved what I provided, I said. Stability, silence, protection. I don't believe you loved me enough to honor me. The words landed. I saw it in the way his breath stuttered. I can change, he said quickly. I'm different now. Losing you. You didn't lose me, I said. You discarded me. And I chose not to crawl back. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I glanced at my watch. 2 minutes. Desperation sharpened his voice. If you walk away now, this is permanent. Yes, I said. That's the point. He stepped closer. I built my life around you. No, I corrected. You built your life on me, and you never checked the foundation. I picked up my bag. Margot, he said, voice breaking. Please. I turned toward the door. You introduced me as a friend, I said over my shoulder. So let me give you some friendly advice. He waited, breath held. Next time you erase someone, I said, make sure they weren't the one holding everything together. I opened the door. Goodbye, Julian. He didn't follow me. He didn't call out. He stayed exactly where he was, alone, finally facing the silence he'd relied on me to absorb for decades. I walked down the hallway, heels steady, pulse calm. There was no triumph, no bitterness, no lingering urge to look back, just clarity. The confrontation was over, and so was he. 3 years later, Italy comes back to me sometimes, not as a wound, but as a reference point. Not the courtyard, not the word friend, but the moment after, the walk away, the breath I took when I realized I could leave and nothing would stop me. That's where my life actually restarted. The house in Charleston no longer feels like something I defended. It feels like something I chose. I renovated slowly, intentionally. Light where there had been heaviness. Space where I'd once folded myself smaller to accommodate someone else's needs. The kitchen table is still there, but now it hosts conversations that don't require me to translate myself. I went back to work, not because I needed to prove anything, but because I wanted to. Consulting on my own terms. Short contracts. Clear boundaries. People listen when you no longer need their approval. I hadn't lost my competence during my marriage. I'd just been donating it without acknowledgement. Isla visits often. She's steadier now, more discerning, Watching the way she navigates relationships, I know something important broke the cycle. She doesn't excuse discomfort. She names it. She doesn't confuse silence with maturity. One night over dinner, she said, "I didn't realize how much you carried until you stopped." Neither did I. Julian surfaces occasionally, not directly, but through echoes. Someone mentions he moved again, that he's working part-time for a firm that once wouldn't have made his shortlist, that he avoids places he used to dominate. His name no longer tightens my chest. It barely registers. That surprised me more than the betrayal ever did. Revenge stories like to end with spectacle, with victory posed like a photograph. But real transformation is quieter. It shows up in mornings without dread, in decisions made without negotiation, in the absence of tension you once thought was normal. I don't wonder what I could have done differently anymore. I know exactly what I did right. I left. I didn't bargain my dignity for comfort. I didn't soften the truth to preserve someone else's image. I didn't stay loyal to a version of love that required my erasure. Julian once told me I was embarrassing him. Now, the irony is almost elegant. The only thing I regret is how long I mistook endurance for virtue. Betrayal doesn't just break trust, it clarifies it. It shows you who benefits from your silence and who fears your voice. I don't hate him. Hate keeps you tethered. I don't forgive him either. Forgiveness is optional. Freedom is not. If I've learned anything, it's this. The most dangerous moment for someone who underestimates you is when you stop trying to be understood and start acting in alignment with yourself. That call I made in Italy didn't destroy a marriage. It dismantled a lie. And in its place, I built a life that finally belongs to me. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If this story meant something to you, if it hit close to home or gave you a new perspective, tap that hype button and let it know. I'd really love to hear your thoughts or your own experiences in the comments. This space exists for real stories and real voices. And if you want more powerful, true-to-life stories like this, make sure you hit the subscribe button and leave a like. Your support keeps these stories alive.